The ring was still on my finger when his best friend completely lost control. I used to believe there were moments in life that felt untouched by doubt, moments so pure that you never questioned them, moments that felt protected from anything ugly or cruel. That night was supposed to be one of those. The lights looked softer than usual, like someone had turned the world down a notch just for us. Laughter floated through the backyard, warm and easy, the kind that makes your shoulders relax without you realizing it. Everyone I loved was there, friends, family, people who had watched our relationship grow from awkward beginnings into something steady and real. When my husband took my hands, I felt calm. Not nervous, not shaky, just safe. The kind of safe you feel when you think you already know how the story ends. He smiled at me, that familiar smile he always used when he wanted me to trust him completely. The one that said, "I've got you," even if everything else went wrong. Then he knelt. I heard gasps ripple through the crowd. Someone covered their mouth, someone else laughed through tears. My chest tightened, but in the best possible way, like my heart was trying to climb out of me. When he asked me to marry him, my mind went blank. I didn't think about wedding plans or future arguments or the weight of forever. I only thought about how much I loved him. I said yes. The applause exploded around us. People rushed forward. Phones came out. Someone popped champagne. I felt hands on my shoulders, arms around my waist, voices calling my name, congratulating me, celebrating us. That was when it happened. A sharp pull at the back of my head. Not playful, not accidental. It hurt. I gasped and turned around, confused, still smiling because my brain hadn't caught up to my body yet. For a split second, I actually thought someone had tripped behind me. Then I saw him, my husband's best friend. His face wasn't happy. It wasn't shocked. It was red, twisted, almost unrecognizable. Before I could say a single word, he screamed my name, loud enough that the music cut off mid-song. "You don't deserve this," he shouted. Everything froze. My husband stepped in front of me asking what was wrong, telling him to calm down, but his best friend shoved him aside like he wasn't even there. People started whispering. Someone laughed nervously like this was a joke that would land any second. It wasn't. He grabbed my hair again, harder this time. I screamed. The sound ripped out of me before I could stop it. My ring caught the light as my hand flew up to protect myself, and for a strange, detached moment, I stared at it and thought, this is really happening. This is my engagement. Security rushed in. People shouted. Someone cried. My husband wrapped his arms around me, asking if I was okay, apologizing, completely confused. I nodded even though I wasn't. Because in that moment, standing there with everyone watching, I realized something terrifying. Whatever went wrong that night had been wrong for a long time. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I met him years before that night, back when my husband and I were still figuring each other out. Back when everything felt fragile and exciting at the same time, he was always there, always sitting beside him, always laughing a little too loudly, like he needed everyone to notice how close they were. At first, I thought it was sweet. I liked that my husband had someone who knew him so well, someone who had history with him, someone who could tell embarrassing stories and still be trusted. He called himself my husband's brother, not by blood, but by choice, and everyone believed it, including me. He was charming in a loud, careless way, the kind of person who made people laugh without really trying. He asked me questions about my life, my childhood, my dreams. At first, it felt like interest, like effort. I wanted to believe he was welcoming me into their world. But slowly, things began to feel off. His jokes lingered too long. His compliments felt strange, misplaced. Sometimes he would stare at me when he thought no one was looking. Other times, he would sit too close, his arm brushing mine, his knee touching my leg. When I shifted away, he laughed and told me not to be so serious. "You're family," he'd say. "Relax." I told myself I was overthinking it. I didn't want to be the girl who caused problems. I didn't want to put my husband in the middle of something that felt small, even though it didn't feel small inside my chest. So I stayed quiet. I smiled. I learned how to subtly move away. There were moments I almost spoke up. Moments when his comments crossed lines I couldn't explain out loud. Moments when he acted like he knew me better than he did, like he had some invisible claim I couldn't see but could feel. Whenever I looked uncomfortable, he noticed, and instead of backing off, he doubled down. He'd tilt his head, grin, and say I was imagining things, that I was too sensitive, that I misunderstood him. And every time, I believed him just enough to doubt myself. When my husband proposed, something in him changed. The jokes stopped. The smiles vanished. He avoided me but somehow watched me more closely than ever. His eyes followed me around the room, heavy, unreadable. I remember thinking he looked angry. I remember wondering why. After that night, after the screaming and the grabbing and the shock, I understood something I wish I had realized sooner. He didn't lose control at my engagement. He revealed it. All those moments I brushed aside weren't accidents. They were warnings. And the worst part was knowing that deep down I had felt them all along. The party ended without anyone saying it was over. People just drifted away, one by one, avoiding eye contact, their congratulations turning into quiet goodbyes. The music never came back on. Half-empty glasses sat forgotten on tables. Decorations swayed slightly in the night air like they were confused about why the celebration had stopped. I went inside without really remembering how I got there. When I finally reached the bathroom, I locked the door and turned on the shower as hot as it would go. The water hit my scalp and I flinched. My hands shook as I washed my hair, again and again, like I could scrub away the memory along with the pain. Every time my fingers touched the spot where he'd grabbed me, my stomach tightened. I stayed in there until the mirror was fogged and my skin was red. My phone buzzed nonstop on the counter. I didn't look at it at first. I already knew what I'd see. Messages asking if I was okay. Messages from friends who had witnessed everything and didn't know what to say. Messages full of shock, anger, sympathy. When I finally picked it up, there was one name that made my chest drop. His. The message was short, almost casual. I didn't mean to hurt you. You made me lose control. I stared at the screen for a long time. The words didn't feel real. There was no apology in them, no accountability, just blame wrapped in calm sentences. My hands went cold as I read it again, and then once more, like I was missing something important. I blocked his number. It felt small, but it was the first moment that felt like mine. That night, sleep came in pieces. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the pull again, felt my head snap back, heard my own scream echo in my ears. My body kept reliving it, even when my mind begged it to stop. My husband didn't sleep at all. He sat beside me, holding my hand, whispering apologies he didn't need to make. He promised me he would cut him off, promised me there would be no excuses, no second chances. He said he chose me, over and over, like he was afraid I didn't believe it. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But something had shifted inside me. Trust didn't feel as simple anymore. Love didn't feel like a shield the way it used to. Even in the safety of our bedroom, I felt exposed, like the world had watched something private break apart. No one talks about what happens after moments like that, after the shock fades, after the crowd goes home. You're left with the quiet and the questions and the weight of realizing that someone you trusted was capable of hurting you. And that weight doesn't disappear just because the night is over. A few days passed before I heard from anyone connected to him. Long enough for the bruised feeling in my scalp to fade, but not long enough for the memory to soften. I was starting to believe the worst was behind me, that all we had to do was move forward and let time do its job. Then his sister reached out. Her message was careful, almost hesitant, like she was afraid I might slam the door in her face before she even finished speaking. She asked if we could meet, just the two of us. She said there were things I deserved to know. Every instinct in me told me to say no. I didn't want to reopen something I had barely managed to close. But curiosity, mixed with a need for answers, pulled me in. I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe, the kind of place where conversations stayed low and private. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup like it was grounding her. She didn't waste time. She told me he had been talking about me for months, obsessively. Not in the casual way people mention someone they know, but in a way that made her uncomfortable. He analyzed everything I did, the way I smiled, the way I dressed, the way I spoke to my husband. He convinced himself that I was sending him signals, that I was choosing him in small, hidden ways. I felt sick listening to her. She said he believed I understood him better than anyone else, that I made him feel seen, that the proposal wasn't just a surprise to him, but a betrayal. In his mind, I had taken something that belonged to him and given it to someone else. I remember gripping the edge of the table, my fingers numb. None of it sounded real. None of it sounded like me. I had never encouraged him, never crossed a line, never given him any reason to think he had a place in my life beyond basic politeness. But that didn't matter. She said he didn't see me as a person with choices. He saw me as a possibility he was entitled to, someone he believed he had lost. As she spoke, something heavy settled in my chest. This wasn't about love. It never had been. Love doesn't grab. Love doesn't scream. Love doesn't blame you for someone else's lack of control. This was obsession, possession, a fantasy he built without my consent. When I left the cafe, the world felt sharper, louder. I realized how close I'd come to minimizing what happened, to calling it a moment of anger, a mistake. But hearing the truth stripped away every excuse I had tried to offer him. What he did wasn't sudden, it was inevitable. And that realization terrified me more than the night itself. After that conversation, something inside me finally clicked into place. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was quieter than that, like a lock turning, slow and deliberate, sealing something shut for good. I stopped asking myself what I could have done differently. I stopped replaying every interaction, every smile, every polite conversation, searching for the moment where I somehow invited this. Because the truth was simple, even if it was uncomfortable. I didn't cause this. I survived it. My husband followed through on every promise he made. He cut him off completely. No explanations, no closure conversations, no attempts to smooth things over for the sake of history. When people asked questions, he didn't defend him. He defended me. That mattered more than I knew how to say. Still, the impact lingered. I jumped when someone stood too close behind me. I flinched if hands moved too suddenly near my hair. I laughed in conversations, but a part of me stayed alert, always scanning, always calculating safety. I started therapy because I was tired of pretending I was fine. Sitting in that quiet room, I finally said the words out loud. I said I was scared. I said I felt violated. I said I felt stupid for not trusting my instincts sooner, and my therapist told me something I didn't expect. She said kindness is not consent. Silence is not permission. Discomfort is information. Those words stayed with me. I began to understand that being agreeable had become a survival strategy for me long before this happened, that I had learned to smooth things over, to keep the peace, even when something inside me was screaming that a line had been crossed. Choosing myself didn't happen all at once. It happened in small decisions, blocking numbers, declining invitations where I didn't feel safe, speaking up when something felt wrong, even if my voice shook. Some people didn't like the change. They said I'd become distant, serious, less fun. I let them think that, because what I had become was aware. I stopped feeling guilty for protecting myself. I stopped minimizing my reactions to make other people comfortable. I stopped apologizing for needing space. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing fully in my own body again, not shrinking, not explaining, just existing, with my boundaries intact. That was the moment I realized healing wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about refusing to let it define how much space I was allowed to take up. And for the first time since that night, I felt something close to strength. When we started planning the wedding, I was afraid every decision would remind me of what happened. I expected joy to feel fragile, like it might crack if I touched it too hard. But something surprising happened instead. Planning became a way to reclaim what had almost been taken from me. There was one decision we made without hesitation. He wasn't invited, not as a guest, not as an afterthought, not even as a topic of discussion. His name was never spoken during planning meetings. It was as if that chapter had been sealed and placed on a shelf we didn't need to reach for anymore. Some people noticed. Of course they did. You don't erase a friendship that long without raising questions. A few asked my husband if he was sure. A few suggested time had passed, that things had cooled down, that maybe it would be easier to move forward if everyone was together again. My husband didn't entertain it, not once. He told them this was our day. He told them safety mattered more than appearances. He told them there was no space in our future for someone who had hurt me. I watched him say those things, and something inside me softened. Not because I needed saving, but because I was being believed. Our wedding day arrived quietly. No chaos, no tension hanging in the air, just warmth, the kind that settles in your chest and stays there. When I walked down the aisle, I didn't scan the crowd in fear. I didn't brace myself for anything to go wrong. I felt present. There was an empty space where his best friend should have been. Years ago, I might have felt guilty about that. I might have worried about what it said about us. But that day, all I felt was relief. The ceremony was simple, honest. When we exchanged vows, I looked into my husband's eyes and saw certainty. Not the kind that ignores reality, but the kind that chooses love with clarity. People laughed. People cried. People celebrated us without knowing all the reasons it mattered so much. And that was okay. As the night went on, I danced without watching my surroundings. I smiled without forcing it. I felt light in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Not because the past was erased, but because it no longer had power over the present. For the first time since the proposal, I understood something deeply. Peace doesn't come from pretending nothing happened. It comes from deciding who gets access to your life and who doesn't. And on that day, surrounded by people who respected that, I knew we had made the right choice. From the outside, it probably looked like everything went back to normal. The wedding happened. We smiled in photos. We settled into married life like nothing had ever gone wrong. People love neat endings, and they assumed ours had one. But healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. Most of the work happens in quiet moments when no one is watching. There were nights I woke up suddenly, my heart racing, convinced someone was standing behind me. There were moments in crowded rooms where I felt my chest tighten and had to step outside just to breathe. Even the simplest things, like someone touching my hair at a salon, made my stomach drop before my mind could catch up. I didn't talk about those moments much. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't want to explain them. I was tired of justifying reactions that made sense to my body, even if they didn't to anyone else. My husband noticed, though. He noticed the way I flinched sometimes, the way I positioned myself with my back against walls, the way I paused before trusting a space. He never pushed. He never asked me to be over it. He just adjusted with me, quietly, patiently. That kind of support doesn't look dramatic from the outside. It looks like small acts, walking on the side of the street closest to traffic, waiting until I was ready before inviting people over, letting me set the pace without making me feel broken. There were days I felt strong, like I had outgrown the whole thing. And then there were days when one small reminder sent me spiraling, a familiar laugh, a voice that sounded too close to his, a sudden grab in a crowded place that wasn't meant to hurt but still did. I reminded myself that healing isn't linear. That progress doesn't disappear just because fear shows up again. That my reactions weren't weaknesses, they were echoes. People often say, time heals everything. I don't think that's true. I think time gives you space. What you do with that space is what matters. I used mine to learn my limits, to recognize when I needed rest, to stop pushing myself to be okay, just so others would feel comfortable. Slowly, without realizing it at first, the fear lost its grip. It didn't vanish, but it loosened. I laughed more freely. I slept more deeply. I trusted my own instincts instead of questioning them. What people didn't see was the work it took to get there, and that was fine. Some parts of healing are meant to be private. It happened almost a year later, on a day that felt completely ordinary. No anniversary, no reminder. Just a quiet afternoon when my phone buzzed and I glanced at the screen without thinking. I recognized the name immediately. For a second, my body reacted before my mind did. My stomach tightened. My shoulders lifted. My breath caught halfway in. It amazed me how quickly the past could resurface, how one name could undo a sense of calm I'd worked so hard to build. The message was long, longer than I expected. I didn't open it right away. I stared at the preview, at the first few words spilling across the screen, and felt a familiar pressure in my chest. I've thought about this every day, it began. I put the phone down. I walked into the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water I didn't really need. I gave myself time to feel whatever was rising up without judging it. Fear, anger, a strange flicker of curiosity. Eventually, I opened the message. He wrote about regret, about therapy, about finally understanding what he'd done. He said he was sorry for scaring me, for embarrassing me, for ruining what should have been a happy moment. He said he never meant to hurt me. He said he had changed. He asked for forgiveness. As I read, I noticed something surprising. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt steady, grounded. The words didn't pull me back the way they once would have, because the truth was, his healing was not my responsibility. An apology doesn't require a response. Growth doesn't demand access. Understanding doesn't erase harm. I thought about all the nights I couldn't sleep, all the moments I questioned myself, all the work it took to feel safe again. And I realized that responding wouldn't bring me peace. It would only reopen a door I had closed with intention. So I didn't answer. I deleted the message. I blocked the number. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. There was a time when I might have felt guilty for that. A time when I would have worried about being seen as cold or unforgiving. But that time had passed. Some conversations are not meant to be continued. Some chapters don't need epilogues. Closure doesn't always come from dialogue. Sometimes it comes from choosing silence and trusting yourself enough to know it's the right choice. That day, I put my phone away and went back to my life, and nothing fell apart. For a long time, I thought strength meant enduring discomfort quietly, smiling through it, convincing myself that my feelings were smaller than the situation, that keeping the peace was more important than speaking up. I thought that was maturity. I thought that was kindness. I don't believe that anymore. What I learned is that discomfort is not something to ignore. It's information. It's your body recognizing something your mind hasn't fully named yet. Every uneasy feeling I brushed aside back then was trying to protect me. I just didn't know how to listen. I learned that boundaries don't make you difficult. They make you clear. The people who respect you won't be offended by them. The people who are offended are often the ones who benefited from you having none. I learned that entitlement can disguise itself as affection, that someone can convince themselves they care about you while completely disregarding your autonomy. Love doesn't demand. It doesn't punish. It doesn't erupt when it doesn't get its way. I learned that being chosen doesn't mean being safe. Safety is built through consistent respect, not dramatic gestures or long histories. Someone can know you for years and still not see you. Someone else can step up in quiet ways and show you exactly where you stand. I learned that it's okay to outgrow people, even if they were once important, even if they shared history with someone you love. Cutting someone off doesn't erase the past, but it does protect the future. Most importantly, I learned to trust myself. I learned to stop explaining my instincts to people who weren't listening, to stop doubting my reactions just because they made others uncomfortable, to stop shrinking to fit into spaces that felt unsafe. The world didn't fall apart when I started saying no. Relationships that mattered adapted. The ones that didn't faded away, and that was information too. I'm not the same person I was before that night, and I don't want to be. I'm more aware, more grounded, less willing to sacrifice my well-being for someone else's comfort. That experience took something from me, but it also gave me something I didn't have before: clarity. And once you have that, it's hard to lose again. My life is quieter now, and I don't mean that in a sad way. It's the kind of quiet that feels earned, the kind that settles around you once you stop letting chaos have a seat at your table. I wake up without the heaviness I used to carry. I move through my days with a sense of awareness that doesn't feel like fear anymore. It feels like trust. Trust in myself. Trust in my ability to notice when something is off and to act on it without hesitation. My marriage is built on that trust. Not perfection, not pretending hard things never happened, but honesty. The kind where I don't have to explain why something makes me uncomfortable. The kind where my no is enough. My husband doesn't try to fix me or rush me past my feelings. He walks beside me steady and present, letting me lead when I need to. We laugh easily. We plan a future that feels safe to imagine. Not because nothing bad could ever happen again, but because I know I won't face it alone. That certainty changes everything. Sometimes I think about the person I was before that night. Softer, quieter, always second-guessing myself. I don't judge her. She was doing the best she could with what she knew. But I'm grateful I'm not her anymore. I've learned to listen to my body when it speaks, to respect discomfort instead of pushing through it, to leave situations that don't feel right without waiting for permission or proof. I don't need closure from people who hurt me. I don't need their understanding or their growth. My peace doesn't depend on their awareness. It depends on my choices. There are moments when the memory still surfaces, not with pain, but with clarity. A reminder of how quickly things can shift and how important it is to protect what matters. Those moments don't scare me anymore. They ground me. If there's one thing I hope people take from my story, it's this. You don't owe access to anyone who makes you feel unsafe, no matter their history, no matter their role in your life. Love should never require you to shrink. Safety is not negotiable. This is the life I have now. Not perfect, not untouched, but strong, intentional, and fully mine. And for the first time, that feels like more than enough.